Hey, I'm Roland with Mobile Geeks, and what we're going to do right now is a quick gaming test on the Moto E. So the device is basically pretty well equipped for the price, at least. It's only 7,000 rupees in India, so that's about, I think, 110, maybe $118, and just under 90 euros in Germany, for example. You get a dual-core Snapdragon 200 in here. You get 1 gig of RAM, which is great. A QHD resolution screen, and that's the bad thing about this, the 4 gigs of onboard flash storage. So these turn out to be kind of a major problem for Android gaming because Real Racing 3, for example, requires just over 1.7 gigs of free flash memory, and I had actually to deinstall a bunch of apps on this phone to actually make room for the game, because if you go into settings and go into memory, you'll see that now I only have 120 megs left, and overall there's only 2.17 gigs of the memory available, the onboard memory, and you can't really install apps or games on the SD card because Android doesn't allow that anymore since KitKat. So in my case, I had to kick everything else off just to install Real Racing 3. So you have to keep that in mind when trying to install games on here. And I don't even know if Grand Theft Auto, for example, will even install because of the little memory that this guy actually has right here. So Real Racing 3 is probably pretty well known by all of you. So it's just a common racing game where you compete against pretty much everybody else on the planet who plays the game. And yeah, it's running pretty smoothly there. I haven't noticed any lags or stuttering or anything, at least until now. It takes a while to load the game and to start it and everything else, but that's pretty common for Real Racing 3. It's a little slower than on high-end devices, loading times, but gameplay itself is pretty smooth, and I haven't noticed any stuttering or anything, even though there's plenty of opponents around me right now. So Real Racing 3 shouldn't be much of a problem with the Moto E. So now I got Grand Theft Auto 3 running right here, and right now it's set to the absolutely highest graphics settings. It tends to stutter a bit because of the stuff that's far away, and so the buildings in the distance are only getting displayed after time. And when there's a bunch of buildings around, it starts to stutter a tiny bit. It's still playable, but you might want to reduce the graphics settings, because when you've gone down a bit, like lowered the distance and also lowered the effects and stuff, it will probably run a bit better. But right now it's definitely playable at this settings, and these are definitely the highest settings. So Grand Theft Auto 3 also very nicely playable on the Moto E, except for one thing, that the screen is only 4.3 inches, and it's kind of hard to steer with the on-screen controls, having fingers that are a bit bigger than the average. So yeah, that was Grand Theft Auto 3 on the Moto E. So this is Dead Trigger 2 on the Moto E right here, and I've set it again to the highest possible settings. It does tend to stutter a tiny bit when there's more zombies running around, but yeah, overall it's doing a pretty good job. You might want to set it to a lower setting, to the lower high res or not as many detail setting, but overall it's still playable on maximum settings. It's just a bit more fluid when using it in the other graphics mode right there. So as soon as there's more characters on the screen, it starts to, stutter just a bit. So now I have Asphalt 8 Airborne running here. Again, highest graphic settings. And as you can see, it does stutter a little, though not too much. Definitely playable, no problem at all. And if you set the graphic settings to medium, that should definitely work out. So now I'm playing Shadowgun Deadzone, and yeah, I tend to get killed a lot in that game. I've again set it to ultra high settings in this case, so always maxing stuff out. Pretty nicely playable. I'm surprised it doesn't really stutter. Only when other players come into the game it will tend to stutter a bit, and when there's like special effects going on, for example, yeah, when a lot of blood is spilled, that tends to slow it down a bit. But overall, very playable, even at super high settings here. So here we have the classic Riptide GP2, and I've also set it to the highest possible settings. And it seems to be totally playable, definitely no problems at all. There might be some cases when the effects kick in, for example, the splashing water and stuff, that it might slow down a bit, but right now seems very nicely playable. I gotta use both fingers on this. So all the effects work, water's reflecting nicely, no stuttering, sun coming in from above. So also, in this case, Riptide GP2, pretty nicely playable. Just gotta make sure I hold it up to the camera here. Also hit the boost for a second. Yeah, so Riptide GP2 also nicely playable even at the highest possible graphics settings. So here's another classic, Temple Run 2 in this case, just for the fun of it. Definitely works nicely, no problems at all, except when you're not good at games like me. So yeah, I guess pretty much all the popular games are pretty playable on this device. You only have to make sure you leave enough room for everything you need, and the bigger games like Asphalt and Real Racing and GTA, for example, can only be downloaded if you're using them all by themselves, and you have to replace them and re-download them.